Hey everyone, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. I know that you really want to find out what's the situation where Ukrainian advanced forces are pushing Russians around Robotyne, but I've covered this in details in my previous two videos. In short, right now there is work that is going on. Ukrainian armed forces are doing work to get Russians out of their positions. They finished going through the supposedly the zero line of defense or the first line of defense, and they are now working to breach the second main line of defense with the pyramids and so on and so on. I will cover it in details on Sunday, but today we're going to cover what's happening on other front lines and generally the state of the Russian military. First things first, the north of Kupiansk, which is the area where we know that Russia has concentrated some of their forces. Russia has concentrated roughly in this area and in this area. And they're pushing from the north towards Kupiansk, and they're pushing towards Liman direction and kind of towards south to extend that corridor and maybe at some point hope, I should use red for Russians, and at some point hope to cut off the lands that Ukraine is having in this bigger salient north of Bakhmut. It's not an easy task for Russians, and they have, as stated, around 100,000 troops concentrated in both of these areas, plus whatever is in between. All in all, these forces are not sufficient for any kind of massive assault. It was always a spoiler attack, and now Ukrainians have dedicated certain resources to this area, which is started a whole new discussion, which we're not going to go into. But what happened right now is at the north, Russians have had some limited success in this northern area. After that, Ukrainians have brought resources to this area back, and then Ukrainians pushed Russians a bit. So it's right now a positional warfare where we can see certain shifts. The Russians are still accumulated here, but we hear that they have been reinforced with less capable units right now. More capable units are slowly but surely being funneled south, where Ukrainian offensive is ongoing. If we look at the Kremlin right now, there are the same kind of reports where there are developments by Russians of capturing certain positions in the forest area south. And there are reports that Ukrainians have entered Dibrova and are counterattacking Russians. All in all, the northern part is Russians wanted to do spoiler attack. Ukrainians brought in certain resource. Russian tried doing spoiler attack, failed, were pushed back, and now it's a 50-50. So Ukrainians estimated to have enough resources to hold Russians in this area without allowing them to advance further. Around the Bakhmut area, we hear that Russians are still having a lot of resources concentrated in this area, whereas Ukrainians are less active right now, and more it's Ukrainians are defending the parts that they have already liberated, such as a couple of important hills, because these hills that Ukraine is now controlling, as Ukraine is stating, is allowing them to control the access to the city. So they are able to destroy a lot of Russian convoys. They're able to destroy a lot of Russian transports. It's a okay position to be in. We want this to be liberated and free? Yes. But Ukrainians are applying a certain logic here that, it's not really that big of a secret. They want to concentrate on the southern front. So it's right now less prevalent for them to make active action on other front lines. They've dedicated reserves. They've taken favorable positions. Good. Now they can concentrate on a southern front line. And some people have attributed that to the fact that Ukrainians started getting more success at the southern front line. Again, about the southern front line and Arihiv direction, we're going to talk about on Sunday because that's the main offensive area. Around the area of Kherson, this is where we're going to have a longer talk, because while Russians did clean up Ukrainian positions specifically on the left bank of Dnipro River, Ukrainian activity on the islands in the middle of this. If let me put this a little bit closer. So you see, roughly we can describe the land that separates Ukrainians and Russians is that there is hard land, like a hard shore, then there is hard shore on the Russian side, and then in between these like are islands or a swampy area for special forces. They're overgrown, and this is where Ukraine is dominating. Here, Russians have been crying wolf for a long time. They're saying that yes, while technically we made so Ukrainians leave the land proper, but Ukrainians are still very active on these islands. They're still conducting all of these raids. They're still coming in into different areas, hitting our troops, capturing our soldiers. They are getting the scouting information. They're destroying our storage facilities. We are suffering here. So Russians from this area are reporting a lot. That is bad. But for our sake, in a grand scheme of things, it's more of a harassment than there seems to be an actual preparation for a land invasion. It obviously might happen, but so far there are no major development in that area. However, one thing there is telling that we need to talk about, which is that Russians that have been crying about how poor their state of and situation is in this area have been very vocally supported by some of the pro-Russian propagandists on the Russian Telegram channel. Remember that what I say, that it is only the Western-facing media and Western mouthpieces that are talking and saying, hey, you know, Russia is having it so good, this offensive is going so well, Ukraine is done for, it's a non-existent country, they should surrender. Whereas when you actually read the Russian bloggers, suddenly the situation just changes 180 degrees. And what they're saying, that the situation is pretty catastrophic, to be honest, that people out there are literally eating mice just to survive. And they don't have any artillery support, their logistics is shit, their weapons are shit, and their positions are holding only by a thread, just because Ukraine is not dedicating a lot of forces in that area. And this is where the bloggers come in, because they are saying that, hey, we know that we are being read by many high-profile commanders in Russian army, so please help these guys because they are suffering, they're having trouble. But what the death of Prigozhin, what the capture of Girkin has brought into Russian military, the whole this coup attempt, the fact that Shoigu and Gerasimov stayed on a place showed that this system is incapable of change. We talked a lot about that Russian system is struggling because of the vranyo, because of the constant lying, because of misinterpretation of situation and non-reporting of how bad the situation actually is. At some point, I believe there was a couple of winds of change shivering around of a potential for Russians to get their shit together. That didn't happen. The only thing that happened after Prigozhin's coup is Putin understood completely that whatever this old system was, it at least did not betray him because people were loyal to him. So what he underlined is that loyalty is the most important thing. And now, whenever someone is bringing, because that was what Prigozhin was doing, he was bringing bad news about how bad the situation is in Russian military. Right now, any kind of bad news by our higher-ups are interpreted as a potential for instability, potential of disloyalty, which, remember, right now is the cardinal sin. It's the number one sin that one can do. You can kill as many of your troops as you want, and you will not get penalized for it at all. But you start bringing bad news, start getting out of your place to try to tell that situation maybe is not good enough. Maybe that people higher up needs to start moving again. And then people start looking you as a traitor, well, that person that does it. And that goes all the way down to the systems. At the ground level, What the bloggers have reported, that the commander of this place was incompetent and that he is literally killing just regular grunts, regular guys in there under Ukrainian fire, and Ukrainians are just reaping the benefits of Mobics just laying around with no artillery support and whatnot. This commander, instead of trying to address, or when the bloggers asked for anyone to look into this, instead what happened was investigations and requests to take captive of these military bloggers came through. So instead of trying to support their version of truth, finding out why there are, if there are bad things that are happening to this particular brigade, what we see instead is Russians are fighting against the truth, because they know that if bad news are brought to them, and if they start bringing bad news to the up top, and then someone up top will start bringing bad news to the up top, again, it will be seen as potential to treachery. And therefore, right now, the order for the Russian military is no bad news. Everything is fine, everything is good, everything is perfect, because Putin cannot handle criticism and he's too coward and afraid of potential coup that can overthrow him again. So no bad news. That's number one sin. That is amazing for Ukraine, because that means only one thing: that the same corruption, the same lying, the same thing that brought the start of this awful invasion in the first place, the same thing that we've seen unfolding before our eyes with Russian military being corrupt, sold out, without people telling how the situation actually is, faking documents and everything, despite everything, they've learned none of that. It's incapable of changing the system. It's the system, instead of trying to change when the pressure for the change came, it's only deeper screwed itself into the ground and resists any kind of attempts. And now this is really painful for Russians. This is going to backfire on Russians. We don't know when, we don't know how. It's going to backfire when the pressure from Ukrainians is going to be impossible to hold for Russians. All of these lying and concealment of information are going to start exposing itself. Russian army is incapable of change. They are completely screwed because Putin has damned this whole thing. Thank you so much for watching this, guys. Thank you so much for supporting this channel. Thank you so much to moderators and everyone else that supports me and Ukrainian armed forces. Thanks to Ukraine ADOPS, which sent me this amazing sticker and a patch for the 93rd Mechanized Brigade Холодный Yar. And I'm going to keep the sticker because I really like it. And I already have Холодный Yar, like this big logo in metal. So I'm going to add this as a special prize in the 100,000 subscribers giveaway that we're doing as a big thanks to the subscribers for this channel. The only thing you need to do to participate is support Ukrainian armed forces and just save the receipt. And if you win, you'll just show me the receipt and I'm going to send it all to you. Join the Discord. Slava Ukraini. And I'll see you next time.